6 p.m. and I'll open the budget work session. We've opened the meeting. Who wants to begin?
Well, I'd like to orient everybody. So this first budget work session is going to be really to kind of give you an overview of some main factors, main drivers of this budget. We have shared a little bit about some of the drivers, not only for next year, but for this year that we're going through. And they are continuing next year. Inflation is a big ticket item, and there are certain costs that we're dealing with, and healthcare is not in the budget yet. We're waiting for a January 25th meeting. So we'll have more information. We were on today with John Burt and his staff talking through some of the healthcare concerns with them. So we will be getting that information as soon as we receive it, so that you know really the multitude of what this budget is going to look like. So I think we had the budget calendar. There's another backup one that kind of gives more details and lays it out a little better. And we call that a budget review session that come next in your book. And then we had Rebecca Bayes and Dave work together on this district overview. We thought that could be a handout or a flyer that can go out to the public, that can go out to the PTOs to get people more involved in the budget process, even before we go to a public hearing, so that we can kind of tell the story of the district. And Dave, I know you worked on this. Was there anything you wanted to highlight? I think the curricular programs and highlights are very important. You know, looking, and we've talked a little bit to you about the early childhood program and the possibility of having a TK transition K program. With legislation the way it is, you know, there are a lot of things that come in as unfunded mandates, and we met with legislators. I think I wrote about it in board notes and tried to kind of brief you on how that affects the schools. So we basically then have to figure out a plan on how we're going to roll these things out. So, you know, the interdistrict magnets are really what's caused us to balance our schools. It's been phenomenal. And we've got really very involved families who care deeply about their schools and having choice. International baccalaureate, middle years, high school programming, advanced placement, doubling our numbers in advanced placement while giving kids support that they need in order to do that work. World languages in the elementary through a DODEA grant. Of course, this is a very STEAMy district, I call it. We've got a lot of STEM happening. It's not by accident. We're surrounded by it in this community, and the arts is big. If you haven't had a chance to go to one of our strings or orchestra or band or, you know, any choral music, it's just incredible. We got entertained a little bit at CAPS by some of our chorus students in the honors chorus, so that was a highlight. So those are just, I think it's a way to look at the district, how many students are there, you know, talk a little bit about our Board of Ed and who they are, who you are, and, you know, just some statistics about our district. 53% free and reduced lunch, 52%, you know, racial minority, number of EL students. So I think it's just a quick view of that. And then we go into kind of our presentation. And of course, this is superintendent's proposed budget. It won't be a real budget until it has your name on it. And so that's why you walk through this carefully with me. And it's really through this working together that we're able to say, you're asking questions, you're seeing things maybe that can be brought to attention that we can look at more deeply, that will cause us to be able to, you know, take the budget to a better place. And I've never expected it to be, although East Line, whatever the superintendent proposed, they usually go for, but I'm used to in Groton that we really go through this with a real fine tooth comb and a really good lens. And I think that's a good way to do business. And then of course, your mission statement, the board goals, and then the belief statement, cultivating an environment of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then the highlights, which I kind of spoke to, you can turn to the highlights on that first page. But Phil, you're going to help us get through the first major page of things. A lot of your work in in curriculum and
Yeah.
instruction?
As you can see, a lot of it, and Susan did take us through some of these, but it's just an idea, some of the work that we're doing, some of the things that you'll see as you're making your way through our schools. And in the first few bullets are all wrapped around curriculum. Obviously, literacy instruction at the elementary level is a big project of ours right now. We're continuing to work with the math, K-12 as well. We're working with our science task force in terms of bringing more science curriculum into our elementary, as well as strengthening them, strengthening at K-12. A lot of it, a lot of this will run through our curriculum subcommittee in terms of our consistent rewriting task, that we work with our teachers and our principals to make sure that our curriculum is consistently updated. As you know, that's been spoken about, our International Baccalaureate program, and the middle years program, diploma program, careers program that run through the district up through the high school. Our STEAM enrichment opportunities, K-12 and career pathways, 9-12. These are all things, like I said, that shouldn't be new to you, and you'll continue to hear about as we move forward, not only through the budget process, but through the school year into the summer. We've talked about the NNDCC, which is leading to our junior ROTC program. And then, of course, you most recently heard about our ideas for transition K across the district in response to that state mandated kindergarten.
And we continue to support our elementary magnet schools with the community partners. And in this last ODEA grant, we received funds to cultivate that partnership. I'm bringing the partners around the table to talk about how they can lend to the partnership with maybe transportation. Maybe they can find some resources and grants too to marry with this, so that we really have a comprehensive partnership. And then our one-to-one technology, that has, I had really applauded that. That was really afforded by the DoD supplemental impact aid, and that, because of our numbers and maybe the votes that are happening in Washington, D.C., as Courtney Payne told us about, that may be at risk in this next year. So that's something that is to the tune of $500,000 and affords the technology. It's really important. So Courtney wants me to write a letter, so I will. I'm not going to do anything, but I'll write the letter. And then it's social emotional learning with COVID. It's not only academic loss and some academic challenges that kids have had, but socially, emotionally, it has really been a challenge, not only for young people, but for grown-ups too. So working with families and students and making sure they're supported and feel like they belong in that school is so important. And then we have the high quality treehouse, but it's just like food services, it's a self-funded program. What do we call that? So it's but it's enterprise, right? And then of course we do have the resource officers at the middle school and high school. They're really very much part of the community. They don't do anything without the other team, so they really are part of a team. And we do have DARE officers that I've talked to the chief of police about making sure that they're really part of our elementary schools and check in with them. And my principals have their phone numbers so that they can, at least we feel like we have some support there too. Now Dave's going to take it from here.
So the revenue on this slide, just to ground everyone. So this is what we call revenue to support education. So it does not include any town contribution, and it does not include any federal grants that we receive, competitive or entitlement grants. So you can tell by the chart here, 80% of our revenue comes from our ECS. It's been roughly the $25 million number for 10 plus years or so. This hasn't moved much. When you get into the state side, there's also the excess cost, which is for special ed, yeah, which is sort of a reimbursement from the state for students in which are required sort of the highest need. So this year we think that's going to be about 1.361 million, a little bit higher than before.
That's gone up from 75% to 88%.
Yeah,
Like
the ratio of reimbursement has changed. I think it was high
our
70s
benefit.
to about 88% this year for Groton, just based on our wealth factor.
But that's
So-
another excess cost that goes to the town, not to the board.
So this one, this last thing, so this is a little bit unique because we spend the money up front and then theoretically file with the state for reimbursement. Also in there is our federal impact aid, which is 4.4 million, it's about 14% of our revenue. It's been running around 3.6 to 4.4 over the last few years. You know, this year we'll hit that number, if not a little bit more. So we're going to be mid 4 millions this year alone. So that's good news. And this does not include the supplemental pieces. It's just the core federal impact aid piece.
And Congressman Courtney did give us the information that that's expected to continue at that same rate. So we're not gonna not necessarily see more, but we're not gonna see less either. So we felt pretty confident in that number.
Medicaid towards the bottom, 200,000. A little tricky. This one is fluctuated from low 100,000s up to 300,000. You know, this depends on sort of the demographics of the town and what the needs are, and also some of the self-reporting that we have to do internally. So this number was taken off the latest state report that we received in December. So it's new information for us, but it's about 90% of what the most recent reimbursement might be. So we're being a little bit conservative here. The last two on the bottom, the other sources, the 61,000, it's really two pieces. The first is, it's about half of that 31,000 for what we call in-district tuition. So someone coming into our district from another district, another student coming into our district, they'll pay tuition to us. And then the second piece of that is for any facility use that we might collect over the years. So fields or facilities.
Yeah, we can show them the picture first. You know, I always look at that pizza pie, and the thing that always jumps out to me is the 74% of salary and benefits. What do we give our kids in school these days? We give them the highest qualified teachers, paras, staff, custodians to take care of their buildings, and you know, secretaries and principals, all those people. And that's what always shows up in the school budget. And this is without the health savings, which is part of the benefit side. So I'm sure that number is going to be higher than 74%. But then you also have the non-contractual, you know, expenses. You have utilities, networking, transportation. You see the transportation piece of the pie has gotten bigger. And then the tuition. And those tuitions are the out-of-district tuitions for students who need a special placement, whether by DCF or by the district, you know, by the state, to support their educational needs that we might not be able to take care of. And then this page gives you some more, and I don't know if we can zoom in on that, but I like this page because of school budgets built by these numbers. So the 100s are your salaries, your wages, the 200s are your benefits, 300s are purchase services, 400s are property services. You're going to learn all about these. 500s are transportation, communication, tuition. Then you have your supplies, which is your 600s, and equipment, 700s, and then dues and fees at 800. And what we tried to do is give you a footnote to share with you why you might see some of these increases or decreases in certain areas. But I'll turn it over to you. That's just my little super.
Yeah, sure. We can
school budget.
we can go through some of these, and I'm sure we're going to hit some more details, but let me give you the sort of cursory view. So salary and wages, you see it's up about 8%, 4 million. About half of that we're going to talk about in a minute are some of the transfers coming in from ARP. So resources that were previously funded by ARP-ESSER, which is our last coronavirus grant that will be closing down this year. So about 50% is from there. 50% also comes from the other side of that are really contractual increases for some of our staff, as well as some additional hiring that we'll talk about.
And I just want to add a footnote to that footnote is that many of these positions were put in place when the first ARP came in. So we had probably 3 different versions. And one of the things that we felt really a need for, especially with loss of academics, was having highly qualified tutors who usually were supervised by special mentor teacher specialists. And we've even gotten our most recent grant in mathematics to have high dose tutoring, and that has really served us well. I mean, the tutoring happens during the school day. It happens after school. It happens during summer. And that was something that I said may be able to be shaved down when we're doing this transfer. But right at this point, we put it in there so you could see and help us with that. Another version of those tutors is SEL tutors. And there's only one or two per building. And the principals say that these people who are really highly qualified, some coming from the prison system, some coming from, social work systems, but really knowing kids and being able to interact with them and de-escalate situations and give them, an ear, give them someone to go to. So just wanted to say that one of the things I do see the largest number of is that tutors.
I'm gonna jump to the middle here just for a couple of other points. If you get down to the middle of the 500 series, that's really our bus contract. That's the majority of that. So we'll be going into year 2, which are another set of rate increases. Remember, that's really kind of two pieces there to see sort of the big bus during the day, as well as some of the buses used by athletics. So that's been fairly pricey for us. The next one right below it, where it says supplies, we call it our 600, but the reason that's $1 million this year. So right in this version of the budget, we're assuming that we do not receive additional funding of the DoD supplemental next year. So we're close to the numbers that we received, but we're not exactly there yet. So we're being a little conservative right now and assuming that what we used to fund in that, but we used to fund in that piece of funding will now be funded by the board. And that's primarily all the technology software that we use, as well as some of the leases we use for hardware. So those are the really big changes there.
And with the software, Phil and Clint are working on a usage report and also a survey going out to staff. I really need to streamline that. We haven't done that this far because I want to get the staff's input. So I want that, and I want to see how well it's being used and really how valuable it is for education, for what we're using it for. So that will be an area we'll do a deep dive.
Will that be a report that we all get access to?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and you can see the survey too, I'll let you have, so you can see the kinds of questions.
I can mention one thing, so I like to always mention sort of new items that are in the budget. In that 600 series, we do have $20,000 placeholder right now for any unexpected unfunded lunch balances. So if you recall on my blue sheet there, we've been talking about some of the challenges we're having this year. We think that might hit 80,000 or so this year, but we wanted to put some sort of placeholder in next year to hopefully cover ourselves should that start to escalate again.
And this is the worst case scenario that we would lose 500,000. Maybe something else, correct?
And that's not only because of what's happening in Washington, where it's being zeroed out, but it's also what's happening in Groton, because I'm missing between 12 and 30 kids, so those impact aid forms need to be filled out. So they're not, we did really well at the elementary, 80% have been filled out, but in the high school and middle school, it's more like 60%. So we still need to do a deep dive and really find out to make sure we've accounted for every student.
But if Congress should reinstate the DoD supplemental appropriation, can you still pick up those students? But it doesn't have to be the October 1st number, right?
Well, there was talk about that at that last conference I went for DoDIA. We haven't looked at any other potential, but I asked for a report to be done of all the coming in and out of military kids to find a high point that we might have had the most. And they have to be related to active duty. They have to be dependents for the DoD supplement. So that's specific to active duty military children.
Not on federal.
That all counts for
Dependents.
impact aid.
Right.
But this is specific for those districts that are most impacted by active duty service. So. And I know Sam is going to be doing more of a deeper conversation with you later on. I think it's in February is his turn, but just to kind of see an overarching, we've been told that when it's in the millions of dollars, that those things get to be bonded, and so you can see that the Fitch High School HVAC upgrades and Charles Barnum, they might not have a case bud for, but we just dealt with an HVAC issue. So one of those priorities is that, and with Northeast Academy and CK, we have to run the heat while air conditioning, especially in the summertime. So we had escalated costs and everybody said, why is the heat on? And I said, because if we don't run it, there could be a mold issue. So these two schools that were just built 15 years ago absolutely have to, we can't keep putting this off. So it's really something that the town has to recognize that we might need to start this project sooner than later. And was there anything you wanted to say about the capital reserve fund or? Nothing. So, yeah, are we there? So that's your nifty chart. You talked about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think you've seen this, but now that you've had some numbers in front of you as well, hopefully we'll start to at least directionally make some more sense of. So if I just start left to right, we just briefly talked about the wages. You know, some of the primary drivers are existing contractual increases, which will have yearly, you know, the state minimum wage increase that we've just seen, as well as an FTE transition from ARPA. I mean, that's kind of the punchline there for wages. And the transportation, as I mentioned, we're going to head into year 2. It's a 12.5% rate increase on the regular buses, 20% for midday, and 5% for field trips athletics. So that just assumes same routes, just increases in rates. Healthcare, you know, we think, as Susan mentioned, right now we're still 0. We're waiting for our renewal meeting coming up. We had one change just in the property insurance. You know, they asked, our broker at least told us to plan for a 15% or so, 15 to 17% rate increase, but we also have a co-share change with the town in that on the property side, the town wants us to pay for our share of the value of the property and how that equates to the insurance cost for those properties. So, and historically, just to give you rough numbers, for property insurance, we've been paying about 34% of the bill, but the property values at the board are about 65% or 64% of the overall property value of the town. So we're not going to make the full swing in 1 year, but the town would like us to get to that proportionate share. So we've got an equal amount of the bill that we're paying versus the property values. So this year it's going to be a 10% increase just on the co-share. And I can give you a document that shows you the numbers around this too, but that'll be a change for us. So you're going to see, you know, the rate increase plus the change in the co-share for the, you know, the property insurance.
That's the bulk of account 440,000.
Let me just, I can just look over for a second.
For this year.
So that is, no, it's going to be in your 500 there where it says transportation insurance. Communication.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be in there. It's not a,
We can
this is
kind
not
of
a
show you
$400,000 or
when we start.
$500,000 number, but it's a change for us.
We can kind of highlight that when we get to the actual budget itself and show you that there's some.
I'm a bit confused on this co-share for property insurance.
Mhm.
The cost of property insurance is X. You're paying, if I understood you correctly, about a third now, and wants to pay close to 2/3 at some point in the future.
Uh-huh.
But doesn't this all come out of the same taxpayers?
Yes.
We're just moving rocks.
So,
Yeah, we're just moving rocks.
really,
And the
So-
property really
so
belongs to the
we're just-
town.
would I be, would I
The
be,
town's
I
property.
don't know who it is. Is it so one group can claim that they're doing better, where really nothing changes?
I don't know that. My hope was just to get cost aligned with property values. I'll leave it at that, because whatever the increase is, we're just gonna turn around and ask for it back per se.
The taxpayers can pay for it. It's
Taxpayers
just,
can
it's
pay
the
for
way,
it
it's an
either way.
accounting, it's an accounting.
However, I'm sorry, go ahead. So, but by the board absorbing the cost or increasing the amount that we pay out, that's less money that we can put towards students and staff.
Well, Not necessarily.
That was your
Yes.
question?
That
You're
was my
on the
question,
same
my
wavelength?
question, help me understand this.
Yeah.
So this is the town's property.
Right.
Mhm.
And instead of it taking it out of the town's budget, we're taking it out of kids' learning. Help me understand that.
Well, if there's a cut, yeah, but they're just reallocating. We've always paid insurance on the value of our buildings. He just
But
wants
it's
us,
increasing.
yeah, it's increasing, but so is our entire budget. So,
You explain that to any, who comes along.
Can I try it again? Is this just redefining the portion attributable to which town agency?
Right,
So it means that if we did it the way we used to do it, we'd have a 1.4% increase, just hypothetically. And if we did it the new way, we'd have a 1.5% increase. So it would look as if our budget and our expenses are higher than costing the taxpayers money, when in fact the cost has not changed. So am I
it's just a
misunderstanding this?
reallocation of those costs that need to be paid,
Yeah,
but
and
from the
there,
town side to the school side.
I mean, there is going to be a rate increase on the underlying insurance,
Understood.
but aside from that, you're absolutely correct. I'm sorry.
What was the
Rational.
That we should pay our fair share.
Yeah, I really think it was about that simple. Yeah. Yeah.
and the maintenance, you could make that case. Yeah.
We did try that one, especially with some of these emergencies. They are the buildings of the town. And these are unforeseen, and you don't really put in this kind of money in any budget that I've ever seen. You know, it just happened to be like the great storm, a perfect storm.
Very good question.
Well, I think as we move through, if you have questions, please ask me. I'd be happy to bring them to the appropriate people in town that might be able to help us.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, looking at it from a matter of principle, you know, it doesn't seem right that to balance books, the town would take money away from supporting students and staff. Just for correcting and accounting. I mean, surely, like, I mean, it all goes back to the town anyway. How much you just invest in the school systems and
I'm sure it's an
Students
increased
and
cost and someone's got to pay for it because, you know, the schools are where we do our learning, so. Yeah,
Isn't necessarily the case. It's that it's possible, it's all speculation. And what they're doing is, like they, what they're doing is trying to get a handle. It's the same way that we've broken, you have this lovely presentation and we've broken the numbers down by building. So look at things another way,
mhm,
show it to the value. They're trying to get a handle on what do buildings cost? What do the various operations cost? So by allocating to another town department, essentially the education department, they're getting a clearer picture. So if they in fact said, you're gonna pick up, and again, making up numbers, you're gonna pick up on your side of it, $500,000. But don't worry, you're gonna get that $500,000, then there's really no change. The battlefield remains the best of the budget. Doesn't necessarily take away from anything else. If you give it the 500, now you'd be correct. If they said, we're gonna allocate this cost to you to recognize the cost of the building, et cetera, town buildings. Oh, look, you naughty boys and girls, you're charging the taxpayer another $500,000. You should cut $500,000 out of some other portion of your program. That gains, I'm with you on that one. But I don't know either way they're doing. So, yeah, be prepared.
so building off of that, I mean, how do we know? How do we get clarity on it?
You won't know until you present the budget to the town council and they put their hands on the hips and, well, what is this? You have some nerve come to us with this increase and say, but it's yours. It becomes a question of optics and politics. Like, nothing we can do about it right now. Speculating one or two different ways.
If they cut the budget, then we can bring this up. This increased.
They own something.
Right.
Like the buildings that you're not even using, that really using.
It's all the buildings that we use, yeah,
It's
not
all
the
the
ones that have been
buildings we
turned back,
use.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just
I just trying to make
just
sure.
active.
And
Yeah.
the new buildings, guess what, folks? They're the ones that are costing us more money because they're more expensive buildings, they're newer buildings. So I think that was one of the big things when I think about the Groton 2020 is, you know, that we have larger property.
And we're gonna save money.
Yeah, I know. I heard
Yeah.
that story too.
I also want to make note, I didn't see who it came from, but somebody in the chat just said that not everyone is on camera. I don't think there's anything we can do about that here,
No, there's a static camera in
But-
this room.
Oh,
just to acknowledge the comment.
Well, if Dean moved one seat this way, you would,
Or maybe just identify who's speaking.
Right.
you know.
That might help. We're hoping for a better system here very shortly.
The cameras have been installed and we're hoping to launch. They will tilt.
Ooh,
Each have your own mic.
No pressure.
It's in.
All right.
all right,
Pressure.
so it's coming.
Want to Move up this one, or, I mean,
Yeah.
the last two were just, utilities we've spoken about. Month over month, and then the one up to the right there, the magnet is, there's been a House bill that changed, which really eliminates the inter-district student tuition being paid between each one of the districts. So what's gonna happen now is, each district will receive a grant directly from the state, so we don't have to, almost similar to our last conversation, swap money back and forth between districts. It's a great move by the state.
Quick question on the transportation
Yep.
situation.
Yeah.
We're in year two, we're entering year
We'll be
two.
going into year two, yeah.
Okay, so the way the contract is structured, is there a break point at some point where we can look critically at that contract?
So it's a 3-year obligation,
Mhm.
but of course they made 4 and 5 look really nifty. Like where it's like, so the way it rolls out is that, it probably would be to our advantage to go the 5 years, but we have been regularly communicating. I put this in board notes too. The complaint came through and I brought the whole management team around the table. And, I always voice my concern with that contract that we're paying much more with less services so that, I've kind of been expecting more. We do have some of the field trips being covered this year and I'll probably propose that continues. So we'll see how that goes, but know that we are in communication on a regular basis with them.
That contract did go out to bid. There were 2 bidders. And this was the low one.
And it was the same one that we had before.
So
So they
If
knew
you're-
Groton.
if you're at the end of the 3 years, you could, I guess, go out to bid again.
And that might make it even. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, so we'll have to. Definitely keep that in mind.
So I just wanted, this was really kind of a brainchild of Dave and Rebecca Bayes worked with him on it. And just to, because we've talked about this quite a bit, like how much are our schools costing us? Now, this does not have the benefits, does not have utilities. Maybe next year we'll be able to figure that out. But I think it's good for the taxpayer, for the board, for the community to realize how much is it costing us to run our different programs in our different buildings. So I'm excited about this. I'm excited because in the next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, January 16th, after Martin Luther King's official birthday day. And it's going to be all around instruction for elementary and special education. So our principals will be here to talk to you about their schools and to tell you what's in that fine print and why that's needed. So I think that will be a nice conversation. You're certainly able to ask some questions about that. And then that'll be followed up by the January 29th or secondary principals and probably special education and then support services. I think that's Phil with what he does with teaching and learning and how that works. So we've laid it out and we've chunked it out for you in hopefully bite-sized chunks so you can really do the deep dive in each of these areas to see what are the costs and what are some of those increased costs and how are they being played out. So we will go back to this when we have those meetings with our principals. So we'll be able to do a closer look. at that, but at least it's right in front of you, so you can kind of see even the makeup of our buildings. These schools, when I first got here, there was a school that had 20% free and reduced lunch and a school that had 70-something% free and reduced lunch. And because of the Groton 2020, we're really aligned with our average, which is 54, certainly at the middle school and at the high school. We had two middle schools that were quite different too, if you recall. So it's a beautiful thing. Socioeconomically, racially, that we're balanced even into the classroom and up into those advanced classes, we're doing a much better job. So to me, that is really an accomplishment that I want to see continue. And that has to do with the inter-district magnets at the elementary and having everybody in one middle school and everybody at one high school.
Quick question.
Yeah.
About the schedules.
You'll be next, Adrian.
When is, when is the public hearing, Jessica?
So that is, what we're doing is February 12th. Instead of having people come out 2 different nights, we're gonna have our joint, what we have is a joint Board of Ed, Town Council, RTM conversation about the budget. And that's really, I don't know, have you ever participated or seen that? So that,
I've been in the audience.
so you've been in the audience, now you'll be at the table. So that's really a very valuable meeting, I think, to have that conversation, and then we'll do the public hearing. So that's when the public can come in and parents and PTO and, you know, people will say what they need to say and, you know, and listen. And so that's gonna all happen on one night. And that's, I believe, at Thrive 55. That's where Joyce set up.
And Adrian, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, I am wondering, how many total staff do we have in the district? Does anyone know that number about?
Yeah, we have that in a chart. We can share that, Adrian, as we go along.
All right, and then
Okay.
my other question though, which is kind of where this was going, is can we get it? These are the sheets for all the schools, but it'd be great, in my opinion, to have a sheet with the central office staff, like that central office staff consultants positions that don't show up on these schools. You know, like the BCBEs, do they end up on the school staffs or is it like on a central office type thing? So I'm just wondering if there's a lot of staff. I mean, I think I found 752 staff members adding these up, and I'm wondering if that's, you know, close to the total number of staff we have in the district, or if we have a lot more staff. I'm just trying to understand what's outside of these individual school, you know, breakdowns.
Hey, Adrian, it's Dave. Hey, in the email I sent you today with all the PDFs, you will
Yeah.
have a PDF that's called FTE, sort of the back page of our book, and those are the active FTEs currently being funded by the board. That'll get you
All right.
started at least.
We did talk about, Adrian, that this was something we discussed at the directors team meeting about putting a sheet out like we've got for the schools, but that's really a central office page so that you can see that as well. So that's something we're gonna work on together so you can see that. Do you have a
All right,
list of those questions that you can send me so I can kind of take a look at it as we start rolling other ideas out? Would you mind? I know you talked about, you know, central office page, a full FTE page, that we might even have tonight.
Yeah, well, just, all right, well, I just pulled up the email that Dave sent me. I didn't know what that was before, but now it's saying there's 796 positions, total. So it looks like, was that 40 or something like that for central office, 45.
And I think, Lori Lapine, who is, you know, our head of, HR and does a lot of operations with me, has actually identified that one of the pages we'll be looking at tonight.
Yeah.
Is in here that will show us, do you know what page number it is?
I don't know, it's under, do they have this exact same book? Okay,
And
it's
we
under
can
the
get
green
papers.
tab, so we can spend
It's
some
the
time
last
on
three
that.
pages
Adrian.
of our book, has all the FTE broken.
The PDFs that you sent to Adrian, would you be able to send those to the whole board?
I certainly can. Yeah, I just put
Is
it
it-
together.
Are those PDFs the ones Joyce sent
Yeah,
out
the-
already?
I don't know if she sent them out or not. She
She
has them.
sent them to the board,
I'm just not sure.
yeah. Did you
It's just
receive,
a PDF of the book.
Okay, yeah.
This is the last three pages.
Oh,
did you
okay, so-
receive the
Yes.
digital version,
Yeah,
Ian?
this
Because
is the
I had
digital.
asked for her to send the digital version.
all right.
And I got a copy because I wasn't on their CC. Did you receive anything digitally from Joy? But I can send that out again.
I think she linked it out of the board notes.
Yeah, it'd be,
Some of them were linked in the board notes, but not the whole comprehensive thing.
all right.
We were waiting for,
We'll get it.
yeah. okay.
Yeah, but just to have it on top of everything, that'd be great.
It's your notes.
And the idea of having like an expandable PDF version
Okay.
of each object or of each department is moving forward.
Yep.
Like, is that a thing that can happen?
So we're gonna go through what we call function codes,
Mhm.
which are in the old book. We'll just bring them, as we go through each topic, we're gonna bring the function codes related to those, so we can walk you through those. So it'll just build to what you're talking about.
Right, so it'll be a document that I can kind of open up and look at and drill down into each function code.
And I don't know, like by drill down, but you'll be able to see each function code and the financials and the FTEs associated with that.
And then a little narrative that goes with it.
Yeah, when I think of drill down, just from a business analytics perspective, it's not a click and it'll blow up for you.
Okay.
It's gonna be a static document.
Would it ever be possible to do this sort of quick and blow up?
I would love that.
I mean, technologically speaking, is it possible?
You have that you work off of, right?
I don't know about this year. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I just don't know if we have the technology. I mean, this is an Excel right now, so. But I'm looking at that.
Have you been in Hartford where they've done it a little differently?
Yeah, I mean, in Hartford, we had an FP&A software that would allow you to access it from anywhere. It was shared with the community. It's point and click. You use it right off your phone, but you know, you're talking 48 schools and a big district and a lot of activity, and it's fairly pricey. But it was the only way for us to be able to manage communication across all the zones in Hartford and all the folks that were part of the process. Yeah, it was really
Something to
good.
think of.
Yeah, it's called Alibio. It's an Alibio software. It's wonderful.
All right, and just a quick circle back to the narrative question. You said narratives will be coming with the function codes. The narratives, are we going to get some sense of the initial asks that came from the departments?
Those were really mostly conversations. I think when the final wrap up was, that was an agreement that was made with everybody. So there was never anything published on paper that was a conversation. Dave actually, he was just getting here new in the summer. And he was going to every principal, every director, sitting down with them, talking about what their needs were, what the challenges were, and to start forward thinking into next year. So those were conversations that were happening.
I think the site, oh, sorry, I was just saying, I think the site budget document.
Yeah, I think so.
And the
too.
site budgets are based on the number of students. There's a formula for how much each school site budget will be based on the number of students.
Kind of a
in the
per
school.
pupil cost. We wanted it, when Mike and I first got here, they didn't have site budgets. Everything was done here at central office and it was kind of first come, first serve. So when we rolled out site budgets, we really worked with our principals about what their needs were, but then we had to really make it equitable. So looking at our students and their needs and the number of students so that we really rolled out the formula. So even in what was asked for, we really tried to stay around that 2% increase in their budget from last year. So they might have moved things over to a different, different thing or held off for a year or whatever they did to make those numbers work, right?
Yeah, they're all 2%.
So the narratives that we'll see will be modified narratives, or there won't be the direct initial asks coming from the principals or the department heads.
No, those usually by the time you get to a budget, just like we go through this with you, you're seeing what are our kind of initial asks. Because prior to that, it was a conversation, but then we have to kind of get it into legitimate possible proposal for you.
I was looking, I think I was looking at some of these numbers from the same types of numbers as I understood Adrian to have said, but doing it slightly differently. I was looking at the numbers of COVID-related hires that we made with federal funds, recognizing that some of them we've been able to retain because they've gotten grants from the state and from your team. They've gotten told to give us some grants. I was trying to get a sense of what was left and what you said now. I'm a bit confused because I was looking at federal and Connecticut State Education Department statistics that say that we went from 759 FTE in 2018 and 2019 to 1,043 in 22 and 23. And I presume, I know that's a dangerous word.
That's a big number.
It is a big number, but I have the printouts.
Yeah.
I presumed that that number included all the hires that were made with non-town dollars. That's a presumption of mine.
Was the title of it COVID related? Could it have been?
No, it was not. It was, the title was FT, it was a diversity study of how we were doing in equity by employee racial characteristics. But it gave the number of FTEs that we had in the district. I believe it was September of each academic year. So that's where I pulled the numbers from. And you know, I was going to take it in a different way. I was wanting to know how many COVID hires we currently have, in what roles, in what buildings, and at what cost. The number of COVID hires for whom future external funding has not yet been assured, in recognition that some has been assured. And the number of current COVID hires the administration believes we need to complete our job of academic loss recovery that justify being retained in the budget. So,
Yeah, and there is a presentation coming tonight with that proposal.
okay,
Of what will come out of our PESER and will go into the operating budget, which will have to be approved. And so we'll have to decide what those priorities are, whether these FTEs come forward or not. So that is part of tonight's presentation.
okay, I thought that was
Absolutely.
coming later on. We were gonna go
It's page
line by
6
line later
tonight.
on. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you would share where that report came from, so I can take a look at that. 'Cause I don't.
will do better than that. I will mail you copies of them. Could you include me in that?
And just wherever you found it, like if I could find
Sure.
out so I can check.
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
Please include me in that.
Okay, to orient us to the,
So we're gonna go to the yellow tab in your books,
and page number 5, right?
page, I'm just trying to find it myself.
And we're passing over some of those seats that we had talked about, which are these excess costs that have come into the town on behalf of the board that go right to their, what do they call it, their
General fund?
general fund? I was gonna call it the rainy day fund, but it's the general fund. And then there's all the different grants you see we've received. I don't know how you got it on one page, but I need my glasses to look at that. And those are both things that we will, I know we're gonna talk about that, this one particular in finance and facilities first. And we can even talk about the grants, but then we'll be talking about that on one of the later dates coming up.
Yeah, I think on the schedule. So if you're on page 5, I thought I would just ground you, again, just for everyone's sort of update. You know, this is our last coronavirus related grant that we have. As a matter of fact, I think all districts for that matter.
Except
this one-
for some of those recent RFSers that we've
Small ones, yeah.
received, little ones,
Yeah.
the
They're
targeted
good,
ones,
yeah, that's
so
what I
so
said.
just a little bit, yeah. But the last big,
Substantial.
substantial.
So this one, you know, effectively, according to the federal government, goes through 9/30/2024. Our plan is to really have this liquidated by the end of the fiscal year, 6/30. If you look just at, you've seen similar format like this in the past, but just for fiscal year 2024, this is our estimate for what those costs will look like for this year, which will tie us out to the bottom right-hand corner of the total grant of 6.5 million. Not much this year in terms of some of the heavy lifting that we incurred in 2022, which I'm sure some of the board members remember in terms of technology and HVAC upgrades. I mean, this year at least, it's pretty standard supplies and a lot of most likely most of the people cost.
People.
So nothing here other than if you flip to the next page, it'll show you, it'll answer sort of start to answer Matthew's question in terms of, you know, what's in that funding today that we have currently in the first pass of the board budget. So the first top pieces they're just people expenses. I call them people expenses moved. So there's 43.25 FTEs in total with salary and taxes, you know, Medicare, Social Security, it's 2.2 million. And then there's just a few non-people expenses that move over as well. But the majority of it is really on the people side. And I think most of those folks have probably been in that funding for a few years now. So just to ground you on the big changes, you can read it as you're going along, but really it's a lot of the tutors. So there's 27 tutors in there, 19 that are English language and math, and 8 sort of social emotional. There's 7 teaching personnel. And then there's sort of, I'm going to call it a sprinkling, right? There's 1.5 of social workers, there's some security guards, community coordinators, et cetera. But the majority of it is really on the tutor side. So again, if you remember back when we were talking about what I call the object codes, the 100s, the 200s, and you looked at wages, it was like a $4.1 million number. And just from our professor alone, I mentioned about half of that, and it's probably a little bit more than half of that number coming over from this grant.
And some of these would be benefit.
Yes. They're already on it.
But yeah, but we
You
don't
mean
know.
insurance?
But that's, we don't have that until after. That's
Right. Yeah, this is just the basic.
just salary and taxes.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense, Susan, as to whether this would be permanent employees or whether we're extending what we initially thought to be transitional employees for a year, 2 years, 3 years?
I would say that, when I look at this list, the majority here are really in what I was hopeful would be transitional, and I was really hopeful that we might not need it at this point. I do still see there's a great need, and, our kids are not all the way okay. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. The social emotional learning tutors, the principal said, please do not take those away. They really have been worth their weight in gold and really being, you know, great people that the kids can go to, and they really assisted the social work team and kind of oversees that. And then, of course, English language arts and math, we have that high dose tutoring for math. And that's not even in here. Those are extra math tutors that are separate, that are paid for by the grant. But we've really seen a need to give kids more kind of small group one-on-one support with the tutors. Teachers do this too during the day and even after school, and we have the Falcon Academy and lots of other resources, but you know, I know they're in the elementary schools too. I'm looking at Beth, so she knows kind of how they're able to assist in the classroom and throughout the day. So I would say, I was hopeful that at this point I would say, oh, yes, there, because I can remember people asking me about the cliff, and I said, well, the largest amount is personnel is with the tutors, and we're hopeful that there will have been recovery, and there has been, but not enough. So I think we are going to be seeing this into the future. Would I love to say in the next couple, 2, 3 years? Yes, I would love to say, and we'll do everything we can.
Sorry.
I don't think that was out there, right? So, you know, you can hire, you know, who's a project, like, none of these move forward because it's practice or,
And that's part of what we're going to have to talk about and look at seriously.
okay, So that.
This is kind of like a roadmap.
Yeah, this is
For
the
where we're
roadmap
gonna be
of where,
going.
where,
I see Adrian has his hand up.
I'm just looking at this and I see, roughly a third, well, maybe a little less than a third, but, is teaching personnel, student support. What exactly are those positions? Is,
Those are teachers, so I don't have the list in front of me, I can give it to you, but it's, if I recall, it's a math, a science,
Yeah.
ELA, yeah.
so they're classroom teachers or they're, teachers that kind of move around or?
no, they're definitely in the schools. I would say more in the middle school and high school, Adrian. Or, yeah,
They're all
and
those
I know that when we built the new middle school, we assumed that we could take away a team at each grade level. But that did not work because we had just the same amount of kids. We didn't have as much space as we had in the two schools coming into one, and that was a problem. But so really, in even designing, going way back to designing the schedule for the middle school, and at the beginning of COVID, because that all happened at the same time, we needed to have these extra teachers. We couldn't run the building and run a schedule without them. And so many of them came at that point. Some even shared buildings, they were at both middle school and high school. But I wrote to you about how we're doing a scheduling project. This year, it's different than the ones we've had in the past because we're training the administrators and the counselors in how to run the schedule, and they're working side by side with us. So we're hopeful that we can gain some more FTEs through that process, but we won't be sure until we actually run the schedule. So that's all kind of happening at the same time. But those positions were really very needed in order to keep our class sizes at about 20 to 24. But there's still some work to be done. We still have some classes out there that have run with fewer than that. And so we're trying to make it more stable so that every class is between 20 and 24, middle school and high school. Except for some
then-
special areas that require less number of kids.
All right, and then I just see security guards here. Where are they? And how is that? I mean, if we added security guards, was that done for a reason? Was there a security risk or, was that just something that COVID added? Do we need that?
So the middle school, the high school always had security guards. It's our largest school. And, we need it for before and after school, getting parents and kids in and out with buses for safety reasons. We need it for hallways. We need it for some of the labs, checking in on kids. So I would say that number did grow with COVID. It did grow that we needed the extra support. And then bringing the two middle schools together in one, they never had as many security guards. I don't even know if they had any. They might have had two resources. They had a couple. So now they're a school of nearly 1,000 as well. High school is over 1,000. And so they've really been very supportive. They actually are, they get to know the kids, and like the SEL tutors, they're another go-to person for our kids in the building. And they're really all over the hallway so that they're in very good access points to be able to reach out to kids or for kids to reach out to them. But I'm not saying that we can't cut back even further. Lori?
All right,
Yeah, so I just wanted to share, oh, sorry, do you have something else, Adrian?
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to say, so this number of, 43 positions, these were all positions that were added with COVID. And was there any more that were added that we're not proposing to carry on our own now, or?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, Adrian. That's kind of what I was going to share next. So what's not on this schedule is we did actually take a pretty critical eye and actually identify positions that we would not bring over to the board. So there were probably close to this number in various positions.
Yeah,
So
so
while we have some of these positions here, for example, we have streamlined some of our enrichment budget, we had more security guards. We've cut back a little bit. Same thing with community coordinators, same thing with SEL tutors. We've come up, if we had anything additional beyond maybe one per school, we streamlined back to one per school. So what's not represented here is probably almost as many positions that currently exist today in the district that we're not going to take forward to the board budget for next year. So
Yeah, that's
those identifications have been made, identified, and Dave's budget took into account that we wouldn't be bringing those over.
And those folks who were hired under the grants knew that their positions were grant funded and were not permanent.
Correct. They were aware that these positions were funded through ARP funds and that at some point those funds would run out. And they will either have to look for other opportunities in the district, there could be some attrition, meaning resignations, retirements where we won't refill positions. So we're already kind of working through that. Knowing where we are as attrition occurs this year, we'll start to plan in advance for next year.
And so our job would be to determine what we think the priority should be for these positions. Sounds like we need to talk about.
One quick question about that. Is there a way to get a summary of all the positions that are not being carried forward?
Sure, we can identify those. We work through those, so we could put together a list. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
And then there have been, like the school, this high dosage tutoring has come in. So I think there's at least 6 math tutors in that this year. So we've been able to take up some of the funding.
Yeah, so with the large ARP going away, unfortunately, like Susan said, student need isn't going away, but they are coming out with what they're calling these ARP target grants. So they're mini grants targeted towards certain initiatives. So the high dose tutoring, the mental health services. So we've applied and received those, and we are shifting those costs to those grants. So that's not included in this list. We're shifting those over to those ARP funding grants, much smaller. It's a position here or there, not to the level of this larger scale fund. But wherever we can identify those mini grants, we have applied for them to help kind of provide some relief to the board budget. Really.
And this district, really having a grants coordinator, and she's part-time, but she's, here with us a lot, helping us out. Seeking some of these grants has been extraordinary, from Dalios that teachers have received, go to far and away places and bring back that information to kids, to, all of our military grants, all of the state grants. She's on top of things, always looking for opportunities, and we kind of work as a team to look at that. So I know that grants are a big deal in this community, and certainly, having someone on staff who has that expertise in writing these grants and finding things about how available are they to us? How are they, are they accessible for us? So she reads all the fine print and then does a really good job writing.
Just a quick follow about the ARP target grants you were discussing. You said they were going to be used for a high dose, or you say high-end math tutoring?
High dose tutoring for math.
Yeah. Is that what you mean by high dose?
Yeah.
Like the tutors for advanced classes?
Well, they're actually for,
It's called high dose tutoring because it's a concentration. It's a very short period of time with concentrated tutoring. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
but some of the tutors that you see here in the game plan are the tutors that are working with our high school kids, even in the advanced classes. So that's why, whether their kids are in Algebra 1 that are struggling, and we know Algebra 1 can be a great gatekeeper. I used to teach the course, so it's something that I want all kids to be successful in so that they can kind of rise and continue. But then, also in some of our higher end courses where kids are trying some of these for the first time, we want them to be successful, and we want to give them the support that they need.
And are these the grants that are listed on page 4? Under competitive grants?
No.
Are these the ones you're talking about that are going forward to
Yes.
27?
Yes.
Yeah.
I see the ARPA high dose tutoring.
The ARPA right to read.
Right to read.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mental health services, all of those ARPAs are targeted, basically continuation of ARP funding in very specific.
And they
areas.
don't just hand them, even the right to read. We really work with State Department to define the decodable text that we needed, the UFly, University of Florida program, some of the Hagerty materials. So we really carefully scripted that, but they didn't just hand you the money. They, you know, you really have to apply for it and show evidence that you're moving in the right direction to be able to get the grants. So even some of the multimedia projects that Clint has and Shannon have worked on and Sam have worked on in order to, you know, make sure that our cameras are set and our mutual link, so that security system that partially through the CIP, mostly through the CIP, but then we also found other funding sources that could match up with that, so we could get everything that we needed. Would you say that's right? Clint?
Right.
Did you want to add?
It was pretty grants that we're constantly looking at, looking at opportunities to take advantage.
And the upgrade, I think you mentioned for this room in terms of the cameras that can zoom and pan.
Yep.
And the improved audio
Yep.
is also grant funded.
Yes, Peg Pisha is a
Right.
state funded grant. We got
Yeah, that's-
$83,000 roughly for 2023.
Yeah.
We just filed all the data for that, so we will qualify for Peg Pisha 2024, which has not been announced yet.
Yeah. And then we did borrow some of the camera and sound system though, for our Fitch High School. Because like I said, there was a lot of music happening there, and, you know, that is one of my vintage wing. You know, that auditorium, boy, would I love before I retire to see that reconfigured and to get those kids what they need with the sound system and the lights and the camera and the action and.
If I may, it was booked every night for the 2 weeks run up through the winter break.
And it was really something to be had. Everyone I could go to, I went to. It's awesome. So, you know, that's something that, you know, here we bought this for this room, but honestly, we weren't able to install it because we had to put the kids first and they needed to perform and I wanted them to perform in their best way and have what they needed so that the performance could come out wonderful, and it did for each one. But now we got them back. But then what do we do in the, I keep saying to Clint, so what do we get for the kids now? And how do I get it for them?
So I thought I'd take you through same section. If you can flip to page 8. Go to 8 and 9 real quick. Just to ground you a little bit up top on just what our budget history has been. Lots of zeros. You know, last year was 2.97, year before that 2.22. So 6 years averaged just over a point.
But if you go back another 5 years, it's a 0.5, half a percentage, because there were a lot more zeros that came and some ones. And so running a district on a 0 or a 1, you can call it flat, but it's not really flat. It's a decline because you're taking away, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you're taking away from that budget in order to afford it. So and this is where it puts us, you know, hence at the same time of COVID relief funds going away, we're seeing this 8.27. And that's just rolling it over. It's not really adding a thing to this budget, right?
It's pretty bare.
So you could call that flat, but it's escalated flat.
Level service.
Level services, yeah, level services.
So the bottom is just, there's a couple charts I'll show you on the next page, but just an indication of what our expenditure per pupil. You've probably seen this, but if you look at 2016, 2017, the first line, we were pretty much on par with the state average. We dropped down to the bottom of 22, 23. We're now about 10% behind what the state average is on a per pupil basis in terms of funding. So if you flip to the next page, it'll just illustrate to you in a couple of different comparisons, just what our net expenditures per pupil look like. The one up top are just local districts. So just to orient you, all the way to the left is Old Saybrook, which funds at about 25,000 per pupil. We're third to the bottom at about the 17,917, which I mentioned to you before. There's the average. So we're kind of sliding towards the bottom there. And then even versus our DRG, similar size, similar reference type of districts. You can see what the DRG average is at 19.4, pretty similar to the state average. And we're second to the lowest outside of Naugatuck at the 17,000. if you look at it by, I've looked at it by quartile, or sort of in the fourth quartile, not to belabor the point, but just some of the other districts have surpassed us at this point.
Okay. I think that's it. Then,
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, can you just move that microphone down a little there to Jenny?
So I know when the. Not know, but I
Yeah.
heard is that, oh, the school district budget is X of the town, so I'm really concerned about the intern, us paying for the property intern, because they get off of that. The school districts, 80% of the town budget, and then people like go crazy about it, and say like this is out of control. Odd peer towns like the first one, do you know how much their school budget is of their total relative to their total town? So that we could combat what potentially may or may not come down the pipe.
Yeah, so there is some self-reporting through the state tag bill. We might have a little bit of historical, it's self-reporting, right? So not all the districts report out, but I can certainly pull some of the districts that have reported. It won't be for this year yet, because they're just starting to
No.
trickle in, but we can look at last year just to kind of get an indication for sure.
Yeah, and also what we should look at too is what that's in class and what is. Because we shouldn't really, we should try to aim for, this is what our money is back and this is what good looks like, and this is how we're gonna get to it too. So that's sort of like, what's a target tier district, maybe that we would want to sort of like, to get to. I don't know if that's already one of the schools. that
well, I
this
think that
thing.
you can look at, when you look at the neighboring schools,
Okay.
there's certainly some of those neighboring schools,
Mhm.
that. But when you look at the DIRG, that's really districts more like us in what they can afford.
Mhm.
And, and really in their student population. So, when I talk to my superintendent colleagues, which is often,
Mhm.
a lot of us are doing some of the really good work. They're a little jealous of me because I get those Sophia grants and I can do some really cool things with STEM that they might not be able to afford. But, a lot of us are doing some of the same things. This initiative with K-3 literacy, with science of reading, we're all doing it and we're all getting better at it, and it's still a work in progress. But, with some of the other best practices, I would say that we're kind of, the state does put out model curriculum, and they base it on the Common Core, and we're assessed by the SBAC and NGSS and SAT. So those are all things that are we're directed to do.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to get like our schools ready, like our
Yeah,
schools all
yeah,
set.
I get it.
And then, remember, these sheets? So I just went through really quick. And most of the teacher averages, student to teacher average is like 6, with the exception of Mystic River, which is pretty much 1%. And then I did student costs to this instructional budget, because that's all I had. We're roughly spending 37,000 at Mystic River, and everywhere else we're spending about 12,000.
So
So
you're
that,
gonna hear about the specialized programs. the
Okay.
Specialized, and so there's a reason behind those numbers, and that's why we're gonna tell the story. It's really important that the principals are here with Denise Doolittle. There are some programs that do require an adult for every child,
okay,
and they're very specialized programs with autism and autistic children. So
okay,
you'll, I think it's gonna help you to understand these numbers
yeah.
better.
So do we put all the autistic children into one school? Is
They're-
that why?
They're all serviced in one school,
In Mystic,
right?
in that Mystic River? Okay,
They actually have their own suite, their own wing, and all the related services are right there for them, so we're able to take care of their needs better that way than rather than flooding them. What we used to do is, well, they were always at SC Butler, so I can't say they were spread out. So you always one school help them.
okay,
Susan, we do have other students with autism in other schools in the district, but these are
That's true.
children with more significant autistic needs.
Right, you're right. Thank you for saying that, Denise. You're right. And it's a spectrum disorder, so there's kids who are gifted and on the spectrum.
Jen, if you want. I mean,
it's almost just like protecting myself, so when you feel like you have it,
There's a PR aspect. to it. if you're looking for something like that, you have charts that are like this, where they're compared, but not on per pupil funding, for example, pretty gross index. But on, test performance, you want to look at that, the trend lines move in the opposite direction. One might almost make the argument that we do the most with it's, if you want to correlate test scores with expenditure, we do the best. Now, I heard something, I don't know whether you were going for this one. We're in a dirt. Is there something that says that we must remain in the dirt?
It's just a district reference group. It's a way to organize, I guess, and all of our DERG partners are also alliance districts. Although we're one of the last ones in, and sometimes they've asked us to remove.
Apparently, no, I'm just thinking, it's an interesting question. What dirt would you like to? So we need to like to be playing in, is that possible?
Even for the lowest one in that higher league, but.
Yeah.
I would say we're moving forward.
It used to be called the Economic Reference Group, and it was really based on economics and, you know, the economic makeup of the district. And in Groton, it reminded me so much of Stanford, where I was the associate superintendent, only I had 20 schools. And I can't tell you how many $1 million budgets I've had.
Yeah.
But it was a real, you know, from the New Canaan, Darien, Greenwich end, you know, the north, and it was a lot of great wealth and a lot of great poverty and in between. And I see Mystic and our Mystic River to our Thames River, really, and I love that kind of community. That's why, you know, this is just a little smaller and it's back home. So this is perfect for me. But I love that kind of community because you really do get a diverse, culturally and economically.
I'm sure the so.
It's just not.
I think with the third, they're just trying to identify our comparable district figures around the state. So when you look at different programs or expenses, you're looking at here's who are similar demographic.
And economics. too.
Economics.
But it's still, that really shows you that if we're right next to Naugatuck, that, you know, we are doing a lot for a little, you know, we're doing a lot with what we.
Andre?
I have more of a comment, and it's something that you've all heard before, except for the new members. And when I look at these things, I think of it of a family coming in, being reassigned, you know, to God. And mom and dad are looking at this list, and mom says to dad, "Oh, honey, let's go to Groton. Let's start from the bottom, and how much they spend on each child." And then she says, "Oh, let's look at the dirt, and we can always move to someplace in our dirt. So let's either go to Groton or we'll go to Bloomfield." That's how useful this is, in my view.
Or they might say, let's move to East Line. Because they spend.
I think they do say that a lot.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the last thing on our list on this budget workshop is to talk about salaries and retirement. And I think you already gonna orient us to that.
Yeah, I think we're using this page one under the red tab. Is that what you were thinking? Page one?
We certainly can.
So we've already talked about kind of the overall salary and wage increase, but just to, you know, bring those back to the forefront for everybody. The salary and wage increase 7.92%, as we shared earlier, about a little more than half of that is the ARP ESSER identification of positions transitioning to the board, or those that we felt should be transitioned to the board, excluding those which we will not transition over. And so that's a little more than half of the 7.92%.
Or the 4 million.
Or the 4 million increase, and then the balance of that is really just contractual increase. So what we have negotiated as a district, you know, Dave has rolled up those contractual obligations, and that is really what's you know, built into that 4.1 number. It's about 2 million 1 to 2 million is the contractual obligations that the district has for wages.
And we just negotiated the para contract with the employers. That was really an important contract. We avoided arbitration by mediating in the middle and feel like it came out here really fair. I'm just saying fair, it's, you know, it's what it is. And, you know, it was, I think about what, 6% in the end? 6%.
Right, and that has been, David's accounted for that in his budget, so that has been built in so that we can meet our contractual obligations with parents, tutors with this new contract.
And that needed to be done. We needed to lift the bottom group because we weren't even getting people hired. We had people in the middle who had been working for years and years and felt they needed a boost as well. So everybody along the continuum really benefited from this negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, we were competitive, that was the reality, right? You know, so we needed to make some pretty significant shifts with the para and tutor contracts to make sure that we were competitive in the area, so that we could hire because we were not being successful with that, given that because we're not. So that has been addressed successfully. You've taken that into account. The other thing that is built into this salary and wage number is an anticipation of 12 certified staff retirements. Those range annually from about 12 to 25, depending on each year. You know, we don't really know how many we're going to get, but we do build in, because what we do is by building in a specific number of retirements, just naturally through that attrition, typically a top step teacher will move out of the district and we will hire a teacher at a lesser salary. So we do take things into account. So when we say we've got 12 retirements built in, we've taken those salary savings. We currently have 7 confirmed so far for 12. So we're hopeful we'll get a few more this week.
And they have it built in the contract that they have to let us know.
By January 15th. By January. So we will know the outcome of that and kind of know where we stand before we kind of march this budget forward. You know, those savings will fully develop, if we need to make any funding adjustments for that. Non-certified staff, we really don't know on the retirements. They just kind of come in. Obviously, when those happen, if it's a paraprofessional or some other non-certified salary staff member, certainly it's the same concept. Some of these typically is making a little more money than the entry-level person, and we'll see those salary savings, but certainly the non-certified staff, we have no way to predict those until they come. They typically don't come until summer. So, anything anybody want to add?
Any questions? All of them.
In regards to the para contract, I mean, a good number of us here were not here when that was negotiated or didn't have much input in it at all. So if we felt like there was something more to be done, what would be the process of reopening that sooner than later?
I think that's something that the board as a whole would have to, you know, talk about. And that could possibly be an executive session conversation because of the fact that you're talking about negotiations.
And looking at the budget going forward, there's not a lot of room in this, you know, next year's budget, but it's certainly something we can talk about.
I would like to make a referral that we make some time to discuss that. So we can look forward. Be prepared.
I have a question. With the salary and wages, how much of that is like just increases in wages and how much is that bringing on same new people?
Yeah, so if you look at the top line of salary and wage, so 4,173,000, about 2,200,000 was on that art schedule, which are the additions. And just under 2 million was the contractual wage.
Okay. Thank you.
And the only additions, correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, but the only staff additions in this budget is on the art schedule, correct?
No others.
No others.
As we go through this process, though, like I said, with the scheduling opportunity, with looking at the kids coming and going and looking at our numbers, even in elementary school, there could be some benefits that we'll go through. And we will do a really close monitoring of that to see if there's other areas that can be reduced with the FTE. So that's what's on our agenda. If there are questions or, you know, and even if you don't have questions tonight, but you think of something, you know, like me, I'll think of it at 3:00 in the morning. Don't do that, though. You know, certainly send Jay an email and he'll get it to me and, you know.
So the plan is, next week, we're going to meet the elementary principals, and also, I believe Denise will probably be joining us for special education. And so at that point, where we start to see the rollout of the function codes.
Function code, yep. Okay, absolutely.
We might want to squeeze in a finance and facility if that's possible, so that I can talk to you guys about the excess revenue that's come in through impact aid, ECS, and excess costs for special ed. That really is, like you said, it's not a grant. It's reimbursing us for the monies that have gone out in the name of special ed for kids really who have significant needs. And you know, some of those outplacements are up to $100,000 a month. And easily. And then so to get 88% back on that, is really pretty good. If it can be used for. So I would like to be able to talk to the board a little more about how that works.
And I'd like to see more information about these building costs that are being reallocated. The proposal.
Right, we can do that. So I'm sure that we can think of a good agenda for that.
Yes.
There might be some things in between since we have a little bit of time in between.
And those function codes will include the narratives if there's changes in the FTEs.
Absolutely. Same as last year.
And we'll get that out ahead of time for you. So like the elementary folks will be coming in and we'll probably review with them the function codes. So Phil and I will probably take time with them to kind of get them ready. And then same thing is true with the secondary folks. We also have Denise in there, I know, coming up on the 16th. So you'll get all that kind of detail specific to those areas.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, I just have one question. Going back to the slide, and I'm sorry if I didn't ask this before, but under supplies, I mean, there's a it's a 31% increase of $1 million in supplies. Is it possible for us to get a breakout of why that much more needs to be spent on supplies, like what that difference is?
Short answer, yes. But I can ground you real quickly. So in the supply number is the expectation that we do not receive the DoD supplemental funding for next year, which has been, you know, $500,000 plus. So what that means is the cost that we would normally spend, allocate towards that funding for software and technology is now covered by the board.
All right.
Is there any utilities or anything?
So that was paid with outside of the budget before?
Yes.
Yes,
All right.
yeah.
That's the DoD supplemental that the current budget of Washington is zeroed out. But at the same time, unfortunately, we're right on the cusp of when we would have been eligible for it, even if they did fund it this year. By, what was it, 12 students?
Well, my number has changed, 12, 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we're close.
It's close enough that I'm not stopping looking because you never know what can happen in Washington and in Groton. So I'm going to keep looking.
So the number here, though, that just so I understand it, the 3229, or 3.229 million, we actually spent somewhere around 3.8, but there was a $500,000 you know, in 24. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
So we're only going up a $500,000. All right.
But
Well,
Adrian,
and
it's even more complicated than that. Just to give you a little background story, with that supplemental impact or the DoD supplement, it has really been kind of a nice nest egg for us. It's been like over $1 million, I think, approved. You know, maybe even $2 million at one point.
Oh, yeah.
So even if you're taking a $500,000, you still had something to fall back on. But really, we've been encouraged by the town, to go in and use that money. As a matter of fact, they actually at one point said, just take that and put that towards the budget. Glad we didn't do that, but now we're down to really just enough for our technology leases for next year. So that's gonna be covered by DoD. That could be laptops, you know.
And even though many of our schools are part of the community eligibility program for lunch, we're seeing those unfunded lunch balances go up considerably. What are you projecting now?
About 80,000.
80,000. So that's contributing to that line 600. And then what about utilities?
Yes, so that includes, I was gonna give them a little more color commentary, and I
Yeah.
can certainly give you a schedule as well, but this, if you recall some of the earlier conversations around utilities for this year and just the risk that we're faced with this year on electricity, natural gas, and oil. So for next year, we've increased some of those budgets, not all the way to the top level, but increase some of those budgets to hopefully cover ourselves, just given what the prices are and the escalation. So although we escalated some of the electricity costs, we've also discounted that a little bit by some of the solar panels going in. But, you know, Adrian, to your point, I mean, a $500,000 comes quick when you have additional electricity, oil and gas prices. We've got the unfunded lunch balances. We've got an investment in ROTC. So that's, and then you've got the site budgets as well.
The
Susan, no question, no question. I've got you, like a gender on a bed, when you want to have a. You want to piggyback on?
Yeah, let's after, yeah,
We can do that afterwards.
yeah,
Tell me, yeah.
yeah, that's it, that would be good.
Sorry to be a broken record on this one, but just circling back to the narratives coming from, you know, the sites and departments and directors. Having the modified narrative that's coming through the filter of the administration. Is that just past practice, or is that a policy, or is that some sort of legality situation?
Tell me a little more about what you mean by narrative.
Like being able to just get the, say, you know, on the ground initial request of what they ask you for.
Like I said, it's a conversation that I don't even have. Dave actually has it with the team and really get, and especially because Dave was new. But they really kept around for the site budgets. We really kept it around 2% since once we got it structured so that it was equitable for each of the schools and kind of really assessed the needs. Now, do certain needs come up at different times that might be a little more? They do. You know, so we have to kind of take care of that, but we do try to keep it very equitable.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we determine the site budget based on the number of students. There's a formula, so each school is equitable. The principals have a certain discretion. I mean, some principals are going to spend money in different categories than others, and you don't veto that.
No.
I don't change anything.
They
No,
know,
he asked exactly, tell me what you need.
right?
And he
And so
worked with
they're
them.
like given a budget, but they actually have authority to allocate
Within the school.
within the school
Yeah.
where their needs are.
And I guess.
And he doesn't really come down and say no unless it goes beyond the parameter of their
No,
budget.
Yeah, so if
Is
they
that
have
correct?
some new initiative, they will build that into their site budget, but they may see opportunity in another area of the budget. Well, I can cut a little bit of cost here to put this in that's new, or they have all of that discretion.
And at Fitch, they have also the athletic component too,
Right.
which is a huge piece, athletic and extracurricular. We've gotten some grants for that too, to help, with the extracurricular, both at the middle school and high school, the 21st century grants. But,
So, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to capture is the idea that, you know, as a Board of Education, my perception of it is that we're here to kind of help oversee and manage and, you know, the whole of the school district, you know, not just one side of the negotiating table, but, you know, the whole thing, right? And so I guess I was just hoping to get some sense of what the on the ground staff are asking for. I know there's always gonna be some natural pushback to maybe, you know, what the initial ask is, to what, you know, administration on site or higher up may feel is a better number to allocate or more affordable. And I just wanted to kind of get a sense of that as we go into the budget. If there's been like some back and forth, or if there was, you know, an initial ask coming from a certain department, or program, or, you know, site altogether, that was then, you know, I understand the map, but I guess I'm looking to understand more about like how departments within those sites ask for
So
funding.
what I can
and
do
then
is I
what-
can, when
what
the
conversations
when the
are had.
principals come, I'll ask them to speak to that. Because that, they do meet with their department chairs on a regular basis. They have them at FIT, but they don't have them, you know, at the middle school, but we have 60-12 coordination now for both schools, so that's very helpful. So that is really a process that's kind of ongoing throughout the year, and then they get it fine tuned. So, and I think the departments are kind of used to a certain amount of money, but if something new comes along or they have something else, that's when the principal's able to, you know, figure out a way to make that all work.
And sometimes, just add, sometimes they'll raise something up, especially like at the elementary, they have these magnet teams, they work with community partners. And they might say, hey, you know, I want to work with this community partner, I haven't worked with them before. And they might raise that and we'll, you know, work with them to say, okay, does it fit the site budget? Or is it more appropriate to use the new department, the new Dovia grant to fund some of that initiative? So.
Then we also have title funds, but I hope Washington continues to
Good point, Tony.
afford our title funds, and we have 4 schools that are titled. CK, Captain Klimovsky was really the only type of school when I first got here. And Claude Chester came on board, but now it's Thames River, Mystic River, CK, and Groton Middle, that are considered the title. We have to look at it kind of each year to figure out how to, you know, we always look at the ratios with their free and reduced lunch is a big piece.
And part of establishing title grant each year is asking them kind of what their needs and wants are, so you can understand, you know, what programs will be supported in those schools that get title. Right?
And so some of those community partners come up in that, and then some of their other initiative, family engagement initiatives. Not that they do have a few more dollars to spend on that, but they all try to have very similar family engagement opportunities and, you know, partnerships with community. And
And of course, we can increase the site.
we can increase what?
And the site budget. It's-
I still didn't hear you. Go ahead.
we can increase the site budgets.
The site, but
You don't want to say that too loud.
And, you know, coming from the other parts of government in this town where like, you know, we could help deliberate on the overall number that the board was allocated, but not specifically where the money went
Right, right.
within the board. Now that I'm within the board, like, is it a similar relationship as far as site budgets go where, you know, we're allocating a certain amount towards that site and then it's up to the administrators on that site to make the final game time decisions? Or are we looking at each object code within that site? You know, I mean, I don't want to be counting paper clips here, but,
No,
you know, you know, in general, like, you know, if we're gonna allocate money for certain programs or certain funds or certain clubs or certain activities, you know,
you don't get into the weeds with that.
so it's more like a
No.
general level.
Yeah, and even I don't. I mean, really, I manage the district and the department and the schools, and we work together with our principals. But I don't try to micromanage those kind of things. You know, they'll come to me or they'll ask a suggestion, but so I just feel like that's the best way to lead. is to let them have some autonomy. And they were so grateful because when I got here, that wasn't happening. They didn't have that kind of autonomy over a budget, and they do appreciate it, and they're really careful with their budgets. You saw that, right? They really know their budgets and they know what they need. And they would come to me, honestly, and they'd come to Dave if they felt like we missed a step or there wasn't something, or even when, when parents have come and said, boy, would you consider this or that? We do look at it, and having a Mark Romano as, an athletic director who really oversees all things after school, between the two schools, it's so helpful.
So from a board perspective, we're depending on the department heads to relate to us what their,
They relate to
Coaches
the
and
principal. This is called,
I just want to
following the
understand.
chain of command,
Yeah.
and I'm a Navy kid, so I know all about this. But really, it's, your teachers who would work with their departments, and the departments that would work with their principal, and then the principal to work with the assistant superintendent. And, we find ways, and we don't just do it with an operating budget. We find other ways to, if there's something that's really necessary. And so, but we share back with the board, and the board helps us, with getting this budget together and really actualizing the budget that we can live with. And we can live with it in the schools, and the town can live with it.
An example of that would be the work that's being done in the budget this year with the identified it's a new program. We need to put some funding in to support it.
And I think there's $50,000 in the budget for JR.
It's not through the school. They identify how much they need to run that program.
Mhm.
We added it to the budget because we didn't have one.
So the number that we see is what they're asking for?
Like I said, if we get to double those numbers, there's that real potential, because the military, I know this isn't on the agenda, but the military is looking to recruit more. Not that that's for that purpose. It's really a wonderful leadership, military science, probably better than anybody. I just look at these young men and women and how they've grown during this year with their commitment. I think the Navy is going to be investing in more JOTC units. The last time when they had their inspection, we got word of that. So it's really about growing this program. We want to see it grow. We want to see it flourish. We want kids to talk to other kids about joining up. And I think it's a great pathway for kids. When I ask them to stand up, if they're going to be serving our country, and 30 kids stand up, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great program.
So, yeah, so we do want to take care of it. And if things come up in between that haven't been budgeted for, we definitely listen to parents and listen to others about how can we find ways to meet those needs. So I do have scheduled meeting with Terry Tinkle this week to find out more.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Well,
So
any other questions? I think Andrea has something.
Well, before I move to adjourn, I want to remind everybody that the Martin Luther King Ecumenical Service is this Sunday at 3:00 at St. James in New London, and we have 3 scholars.
Actually,
Motion to adjourn. Oh,
you saying that just reminded me of something else. There's also another event at January 15th, at
we don't have 3 scholars, Gianni Drab, Catherine Reagan, and Calvin McCoy. I gotta say that. That's most important.
all right, so January 15th, at 12 p.m. at St. John's Christian Church at 346 Shanticosset Road, Groton. There'll be a Martin Luther King event. Speakers and some other singers.
what's the date on that one?
January 15th,
Monday.
Martin Luther King Day,
Oh.
noon
Day itself.
at St. John's Christian Church.
Okay.
346 Shanticosset Road. That's the church right on See out on the corner of Grantham Manor and Groton Estates.
Mhm.
I encourage everyone to go.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion
Do we have
to
a second?
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.